Well, every tribe needs a talisman. That's a good luck charm, if you will. And of course, they need a bogeyman as well to rail against. The left, well, they've got their modern deities, race-baiting President Obama, and in Australia, spendthrift Gough Whitlam, for example. And their demons, well, of course, they include Donald Trump and our very own Tony Abbott. Now, on the political right, the legends are Thatcher, Reagan, Howard, and yet nothing seems to stir the enmity like the name George Soros. Now, I often wonder why that is. Surely it's not just because Soros is a very rich man, a multi-billionaire. There are plenty of those out there around the world. And the left, well, they'll say that any criticism of Soros is actually motivated by anti-Semitism. But that doesn't ring true either. You see, the centre-right political sphere, they're usually the unabashed supporters of the Jewish state, while the most anti-Semitic fervour is usually recorded on the left side of politics. So who really is George Soros? Well, according to his website, he is, and I quote, prominent international supporter of democratic ideals and causes for more than 30 years. His philanthropic organisation, the Open Society Foundations, supports democracy and human rights in more than 100 countries. Now, it also says he's one of history's most successful financiers and has actually given away more than $32 billion to his foundation's work. And that work is, and I quote again, to support individuals and organisations across the globe fighting for freedom of expression, accountable government, and societies that promote justice and equality. Well, what's wrong with that? It all sounds peachy and a postcard for billionaire philanthropy. However, once you get past the self-serving website blurb, it is a slightly darker path that gets revealed. You see, Soros and the Open Society Foundation's billions look to be a one-way flow of leftist funding. There is scarcely a left-wing cause he doesn't have his financial fingerprints on. Now, most of these are done at arm's length through myriad of intermediary companies and organisations, but the original source of the funds is often the same. Now, in America, there's websites that document hundreds of organisations that benefit from Soros funds, including innocuous-sounding groups like Defenders of Wildlife, which is actually a green group that condemns logging, farming, mining, and recreational motor vehicles, much like our own Greens here in Australia. And right through to Planned Parenthood, which sounds pretty innocuous too, but it is the largest abortion provider in the United States. Soros is also a keen advocate for the World Economic Forum, where he is an agenda contributor with such notable contributions as blaming the hysterical anti-Muslim reaction to terrorism as actually creating a breeding ground for terrorists, and that the way to defeat ISIS and Islamic extremism is to not react like Donald Trump and Ted Cruz. Gee, last time I looked, the Trump approach actually worked, while the Soros approach, led by Joe Biden, has already proved to be a disaster. Soros also gave a speech to the WEF held at Davos in 2019. In that speech, he roundly condemned the surveillance state and authoritarian government. He said, and I quote again, "Authoritarian regimes use whatever instruments of control they possess to maintain themselves in power at the expense of those whom they exploit and suppress." Well, I happen to agree with him. However, the difference between words, which are actually very, very cheap, and action, which is actually very expensive, shows why people put money where their mouth should be. And that's why we pay more attention to what Soros actually does rather than what he does say. Now, I'm the first to say there is a lot of myth mixed with truth surrounding this man and his outreach. Organisations that he's reputedly funded in turn are reported to have funded Australian left-wing campaign organisations like Get Up, for example. Now, that's what people tell me, and it's what my research sort of suggests, but it's very hard to track down. But some of his influence has been revealed before. In 2016, the Australian newspaper revealed that Soros-affiliated organisations, quote, attacked liberal democracy by delegitimising the classically liberal values of individualism, free speech, logical argument, and public reason. That column by Jennifer Oriel noted, and I quote again, "While NGOs and human rights groups routinely demand greater governmental transparency and accountability, they are rarely required to live up to their own standards." Well, that certainly seems true. In this case, a new global transparency group, Transparify, rated Soros' foundations 0 for transparency among more than 200 organisations. Well, a new book scheduled for release in December now promises to reveal the secret network of George Soros and his influence on global affairs. It covers every single notable organisation that Soros has funded over the past 2 decades, and it exposes his influence on higher education, the 2020 US presidential election, his manipulation of the media, and the true story surrounding his childhood under the Nazis in Hungary. The author, Matt Palumbo, promises the book reveals, and I quote, every salacious detail that's to be gleaned from leaked documents from Soros's Open Society foundations, how his money is influencing politics in America and abroad, and how Soros is funding the decline of law and order in America.